Hello, everybody. You are in for a treat with Rita King. Before I introduce her, let me just say that she's going to be talking about one area of the industry that everybody loves to talk about, but only when they are within a particular crowd, a particular group of folks who understand the challenges, the opportunities, and the promises. Rita is here to help us understand better the regulatory environment, the compliance environment, the manufacturing, everything that you need to understand about the medical industry. Like I said, it's going to be a real treat. One of these reasons is because this is an area where regulations play a prominent role. And yet, it is also one of the most promising areas for this industry. In addition, Rita is going to be merging it with the hottest topic that all of us are looking at now, artificial intelligence. Now, before I introduce her, a few tips as we begin this final session of today. Now, if you have a question for Rita, please click the Q&A button in the upper right corner of your screen and type your question into the window. We will try to answer as many questions as possible live. Others may be answered in the chat response within the Q&A. All our presentations are being recorded. They will be available after the live session. So if you miss anything, or you want to refer these to a friend, a colleague, somebody else who you think might be interested, please come back and enjoy this particular session. Rita King is our guest for this really, really interesting session that merges AI and machine learning strategies in the support of the medical device clearance and lifecycle planning market. She's an internationally recognized regulatory expert, a founding member of the Underwriters Laboratories team that defined, launched, and managed the operations of the first US program to evaluate safety critical software using commercial and medical devices. She's not just somebody who's a regulatory expert. She's also an entrepreneur. She's the founder and CEO of MethodSense. And she is a developer of LuminLogic regulatory compliant medical product lifecycle platform. Now, all of that sounds like a mouthful. Rita is going to break it down, and you'll understand why we wanted to have her. Well, I really, really personally wanted to have her on this particular event because I think she's really going to help us understand what's going on behind the scene with the medical lifecycle and medical device market. Rita, over to you.
Thank you so much, Balaji. Thank you for this warm introduction. And thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning if you're somewhere else in the world. I'm very excited to be here with you today because, as Balaji said, AI is really transforming the world, and in healthcare is really transforming healthcare through advanced diagnostics, treatment planning, and patient monitoring. And in reality, it creates a great hope for future medical advancements. So as we begin, we're actually, we know that the market for AI is driven by medical devices that are expanding rapidly. So if we can actually start by, again, what does this mean? As I mentioned, again, the market for AI driven medical devices is expanding radically, and it is much faster than in previous decades that we used to work with software-enabled devices. And that means that both innovators and regulators are facing more complex challenges. And I would like to break some things down for you today to really understand. So when we're thinking about the innovators, actually I'm on the previous slide. So when we're thinking about the innovators, we are thinking about the economic and regulatory challenges that the innovators are facing. For example, and to bring an AI-enabled medical device to the market today, it is a lot more expensive than the traditional electromechanical device of the past. It's also more expensive economically, I guess, more It requires a lot more resources than other software-enabled medical devices. And we will understand this as we proceed today. And many of you already understand that. And the regulatory landscape continues to evolve. So that means that the innovators are facing a lot more regulations. The regulators are also seeing challenges. So the regulators are faced with hundreds of AI-enabled devices that they're reaching their desks. They need to review them as fast as they can. And they need to have both the clinical knowledge, the technology knowledge, the biostatistical knowledge. So they also need the right resources to review these devices. And most importantly, they need the regulatory framework to really support them review these devices. As we are looking at, again, the great benefits of AI, it's also important to really think about its risks, because with new opportunities also come certain risks. One way to really think about the risks and what have we learned is to really think about what have we really learned from the past decade of developing safety critical software, but not really AI-enabled software. For those of you that have been in the market for several decades, you're probably going to know what I'm talking about. And for those of you new, I hope that you understand. I have been in the market for over 35 years, and I started as a regulator, as Balaji explained a little bit about my background. That meant I had the opportunity to work with regulators all over the world. And when we started in the mid-90s or in the early 90s, understanding what software meant for medical devices, we understood that we needed a different way to regulate them. The difference back then, when we were thinking about software versus electromechanical devices software, we could not take that software, put it in the oven, get it out, and confirm whether it was baked or not, whether its temperature affected it or not. So because software was a different animal. So this is when regulations evolved to software development lifecycle, following the waterfall model. And anybody who has used a waterfall model knows how painful it was back then to try to build the requirements. From there, go to the specifications, from the specifications to the testing, and then the different types of testing, I should say, and then get to the validation of the software. And before you get there, to figure out that you needed to add one more requirement or make a change to the requirement, and you had to go all the way back to the beginning, re-record, make the changes, while the rest of the world was moving to agile methodologies. And we in the medical devices, again, still struggling to convince the regulators that that model was not working. So I truly believe that these lessons of the past have been learned. And as I'm going to spend a little bit of time today to share with you why I believe that and what is happening really in the world of AI. Because again, the greater the innovation, the more the transparency and collaboration that it's needed across the entire ecosystem. So because we're dealing with an ecosystem, let's spend just a couple more minutes discussing this. So let's talk about the conflicting interest of the different entities that come together to influence the commercialization of an AI-enabled medical device. So when we look at the visionary founder, could be a doctor, could be a talented professional who sees an idea to change healthcare and builds this company, again, to change healthcare or part of healthcare. So again, he's facing the challenges we already talked about. He's working with technologists that they are interested in working with the latest and greatest, which is now AI-enabled medical devices. And maybe these people are also interested in changing the world. The visionary founder may also actually be facing a challenge. Maybe his mother, his daughter, a family member has been dealing with a disease, or even himself. We see a lot of people in our world where they are founders because they had challenges. The technologist who's working with that innovator may also be facing similar challenges and interested in supporting, or as I said, maybe interested in just working with the latest and greatest, and feels really good about enabling better healthcare for the patients. And then we have the investor. The investor of today sees a tremendous opportunity because it is a tremendous opportunity. It's a multi-billion-dollar market. And the reality is that the investor knows that the faster they move, the better the opportunity to capture that audience. So for the investor, the speed is of the essence. And then let's say, again, there's a lot of stakeholders, but let's get to the regulator. The regulator is been seen over the years as the police. We need them in order to approve that safe product that needs to reach the market. But in reality, the regulator is interested in safety of the user. And individually, if we take all the stakeholders of this life cycle, the development of a medical device, because I'm not there is also additional ones, the quality, the regulatory, our manufacturing, suppliers, all kinds of entities here. And each one of them serves a role and has an interest. So when we examine individually each of those interests, we can see them, some of them conflicting, and some of them more than others. But if we inspect them a little bit more closely, what appears to be diverse interests, they ultimately can align towards a shared and highly desirable goal of ensuring that the device is innovative, it's effective, it is safe, and it's commercially viable. And I believe it's as we move forward, looking at this ecosystem along with the regulations of the AI-enabled device, we will see how we can accelerate its commercialization. So before we go too far, let's actually look at the regulatory landscape, starting with some basic things like a terminology. So let's discuss what is artificial intelligence, and let's use FDA's terminology. In this case, what we have here is part of how FDA defines in their guidance for artificial intelligence and machine learning and software as a medical device, what artificial intelligence is. And they tell us that it is the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. AI consists or can use different techniques. It includes models based on statistical techniques and data, and machine learning. Machine learning algorithms is actually an AI technique. And the algorithms can be locked or can be adaptive. So a locked algorithm, and many of you may know, they include functions that do not change. So you train the algorithm on data that you have collected. And then if you need, and you lock that algorithm, you validate it. And then if you need to change it, you need to provide additional data to be able to change that locked algorithm. An adaptive, actually, let me give you an example. An example from a device that we have actually worked with. Let's say a cardiovascular device that identifies the likelihood of coronary artery disease, as CAD. So that was a locked algorithm. On the other hand, an adaptive algorithm can learn from new data and can adjust its output, like an insulin pump that actually understands the needs of the user and adjusts the output based on, again, the needs of that particular patient. Adaptive algorithms are very interesting to all of us. And FDA is actually working on a comprehensive regulatory framework and guidelines to be able to address this continuous learning and implications on patient safety that adaptive algorithms introduce. And the techniques are a little bit different, but again, we're all interested in continue improving and creating, again, this machine learning algorithms. So the question that a lot of times people ask us is whether FDA has experience with AI. So let's move into does FDA seen AI and have they cleared devices? Actually, FDA has been working in the medical device space for over 12 years. MethodSense, myself, and our team have been working in the space for the same amount of time since the very beginning. And what we have in front of us in the slide that we have created for you is that FDA has already cleared over 950 devices to date. And these devices, the majority of them are in cardiology and radiology. But as you can see, there is a lot of other areas that have actually been touched by AI. And if you don't see one, I promise you, it's probably already in development and already there. So in 2024 alone, FDA is planning to actually exceed the target that they had in 2023. In 2023, they were able to clear 221 devices. And this year will exceed that goal, which means that over 1,000 devices will be cleared by the end of 2024. The majority of these devices are locked algorithms. And the majority of these devices also have gone through the different pathways of 510Ks, de novos, as well as PMAs, with the majority of them in de novos and 510Ks. A lot more 510Ks these days than we used to have in the early days, because again, AI is now starting to be creating multiple predicates. So the next question, as we're thinking about the regulatory landscape, which is also so important, is really FDA an obstacle to innovation? The answer that I have for you is no, and I will explain why I'm saying no. Actually, the regulators, FDA and others, are actually interested in accelerating innovation, but they want to accelerate safe innovation because, as I mentioned again, AI brings different types of risks. The focus of the regulator, as we discussed earlier, as one of those stakeholders of the development of a medical device, is patient safety. And for that, it means that the safety, the efficacy, and the security of the medical device is really important to the FDA. That means that when they actually try to clear or to approve a medical device that it's AI enabled, they need to make decisions based on scientific and clinical data. And for that, we need the regulatory framework. And for that, I'm sorry, I'm still on the previous slide. And for that, we have multiple FDA guidance that has been created as it relates to AI. Actually, since 2016, FDA has continuously bringing out new guidance, with the latest one coming this month again in 2024. In December of 2024, just again a couple of days ago, they've actually published a guidance for marketing submission recommendations for predetermined change control plan for AI-enabled medical devices, which provides recommendations for predetermined change control plans, PCCPs as they are called, tailored specifically for AI. These are the kind of plans that are going to enable us to take those AI continued learning algorithms and look for techniques and ways to bring them through the FDA. So FDA is very active in that field, but they're also active, as I mentioned, in helping us understand the overall product life cycle that enables, again, the development of particularly an AI-enabled medical device, the cybersecurity expectations, because cybersecurity is very important in AI, because most of the AI data have been sitting on the cloud, and they are introducing, again, a lot of cybersecurity risks. And then they're also interested in helping us with taking advantage of real world evidence. And for that reason, they are supporting us with guidance and other ideas related to post-market information. Now, with that, let's look a little bit at what's happening in the market, how our regulators are promoting a safe innovation that I'm talking about. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when I was working with the regulations in the 90s, if you had a device that you were going to take it to the US and then you were going to take it to Europe, or from Europe to the US, or to Canada, to Japan, or whatever other places in the world, a lot of times you were dealing with conflicting standards and regulators were not harmonizing with each other. What we see is, having learning from the past, in this case, Health Canada, FDA, and MHRA, the United Kingdom regulatory agency, in 2021, they actually worked together to develop what they call the 10 guiding principles for good machine learning practices, the GMLP. And the purpose of this effort is to accelerate the creation of AI-enabled devices so that we can have effective and great quality devices with real world use and have ways to improve the device performance. So that takes us to an important concept that we need to discuss, and this is the total product lifecycle principles for sustainable growth. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what does this mean again for AI-enabled medical devices, and if we look at it, I should say we can look at it from just the development of a device, but if we really look at it also for, can we utilize these principles to create a better company? At the end, we will have a faster and better commercialized product, but also, I believe, a better business. So that means that we need to integrate, when we develop a medical device that is AI enabled, we need to integrate the team along with the technology, the data, the processes, the users, and all this based on a risk-based approach, that it is flexible, it is adaptable, and learns and continues to improve. So starting with the innovation, or the idea in a way of innovation, and thinking about the total product in a way lifecycle integration, we have to take into account this multidisciplinary team that has a lot of different expertise. And we need to also understand how our product integrates in the clinical workflow and what is the impact that we're creating on this workflow. We also need to think about the commercialization that it eventually will happen to the product. And we need to think about what type of models and what kind of information, or what do we need to know so that after the product is actually gets commercialized, we understand its integration and commercialization, that and commercialization information that we need to gather. So once we have them, again, the life cycle integration, then we need to think about also the model. And for them, a robust model with data management means also the development of good software engineering practices. And in those also comes data quality and quality assurance management, which means cybersecurity practices and other type of practices, methodical processes that we need to follow in order to be able to evolve and capture the overall design. But the additional thing that AI has is that it's in order to be able to test it, you need clinical data. And that's very different than, again, other simpler, even software-enabled devices that, let's say, did not require clinical data in the past. And so, but the clinical data have to be tailored, and they have to be based on the patient that we are targeting. Then we need to think about the real world conditions, and we need to think a lot about this population. For example, if we're developing a cardiovascular device for the US population, but we got data in Japan, can we really utilize this data from the Japanese population in the US clearance? Possibly, some of it, but we really need to think about the similarities and differences between the different populations in order to figure out how we're going to also explain it to our regulators about why certain data is relevant. We also need to think about and account for the age, gender, population. One of the things that I've learned over the years, and in one situation, we are working with a truly amazing device that it was AI enabled, and the founders and the technologists really believe that this device will work across any type of population. FDA was asking us all kinds of different questions, and through these questions, and trying to really go back to our data and answer those questions, we learned that the device was really good for let's say males, but it was not good for females, or it was good for a certain age population, but not for all. So, and that's why if you bring in AI-enabled medical devices to the FDA, you will get a lot of questions. They also, as you're thinking about your clinical relevance data, you need to think also about bias. And there's, again, just a few things, and we will talk more about it as we discuss the needs of clinical data, in particular for AI-enabled medical devices. So another area as part of this life cycle that FDA would like us to think about is the user who's going to receive that information. And they want us to be able to provide them clear information. For example, and instructions for use that may be very relevant for the doctor, it may not be supportive for the end user who's using the device at home. So that's what we call the human AI team integration that we also need to be able to think about. For this reason, we will be asked about human factor studies, and we need to consider our audience and the different types of audiences and how they will behave when they're using our device. And then we're thinking about commercialization. And as part of the commercialization, once our device is in the market, as I mentioned at the beginning, we need to think about how we're going to be collecting data where real world use data can actually support the future learning of our device and even its performance. Maybe we thought it was performing in particular ways, and now more data is giving us additional information that helps us reconsider but make a better medical device. Or maybe it's giving us information that it expands our indications for use in more ways that we even realize. But risk management and risk-based approach will continue to be a focus around AI-enabled medical devices. So with that, let's move forward to a principle that FDA calls the transparency principle, or the transparency concept. And what this concept does, I believe it brings both the device and the stakeholders together. And they are asking us, and when you sit and think about it, you realize how important it is. They're asking us to think about transparency, again, across both the device, the audience, the users, and they're saying to us, think about who is your relevant audience, who will be using the device, why, what is your motivation for creating this device? In the US, we never had FDA asking questions about clinical relevance, at least not in the past. It wasn't a common question, let's put it this way. It's not never, but it wasn't a common question. But today, we are seeing more and more the question as to, is this tool really needed? Is it going to be destructive or even misunderstood by your users? Let's take an example. You're creating a device that you think that its purpose is going to be to prioritize which patients need to go through MRI scanning, let's say. And but your device appears to be so good that maybe the doctors misunderstand it, and they think that it's telling you that the patient needs or does not need an MRI. But that was not your intent. So that changes how you test the device. That changes how the device has been used. So it is important for us to really make sure that we also think not only the why, but also the what. Is the information appropriate? Is it relevant for our audience? Will it be understood? Also, where is this device going to be placed? Is it going to be in the hospital? Is it going to be at home? Because the different placement of the device can also mean different requirements. So as you're developing an AI-enabled medical device, that's another question that we need to take into consideration in our overall product development lifecycle and risk-based approach. And then also, when is it going to be used in the clinical workflow? Back to the example that I mentioned as to prioritizes versus diagnosing and other types of things. And then what are the methods that you're using to support the transparency? Meaning, again, do the users fully understand the limitations of our AI-enabled medical device? So again, as you can see, product lifecycle, along with transparency, I believe play an important role. And I believe that these are lessons learned from the past. The next principle I would like us to really discuss, that's very important for AI-enabled medical devices, is clinical data. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is probably the topic that we spend the most time with, and that is, why do we need clinical data? And how much clinical data do we really need? As I mentioned earlier, when you're dealing with AI-enabled medical devices, we need to test the performance of that algorithm. And the best way to be able to test it is with clinical relevant data. So that means we're going to need to create a statistically sound plan. That means now in the team, along with our quality and regulatory and technical experts, we need a biostatistician to support us to create a statistical analysis plan. We need to think about the patient population. We need to think about the subgroups that are going to be taken into consideration for the indications of use of our device. Again, the clinical environment, our users, and all these additional factors that we have been discussing. So with that, I would like to continue as we are discussing the performance of the algorithm and talk about some basic concepts of the performance, which is the sensitivity and specificity. So again, I'm not going to get into statistical analysis here, but I want to talk about some basics, because when we talk about the performance of the algorithm, sensitivity and specificity become very critical considerations. So sensitivity, you may already know, it's the algorithm's ability to correctly identify patients with disease, the true positives, while the specificity is the ability of the algorithms, or the algorithm's ability to correctly identify patients without the disease, true negatives. What does this mean? If you have a high sensitive device, that means you're looking probably at a rule out device, or you say my device has high sensitivity and I'm going to treat it as a rule out device. What does this mean? That means, for example, if you were in the heart failure world and you say my device output is that I do not detect heart failure, that means that you're telling the clinicians that they can be confident that this patient does not have heart failure. On the other hand, if you say my device have high specificity, then you're saying I have a rule-in device. And in the same example, if the output of your algorithm was that it detected heart failure, then that means that your clinicians feel confident, or they can feel confident that your patient should be referred to a cardiologist for an echocardiogram or something else. So again, specificity, sensitivity, along with other NPV and PPV and other statistical principles, are important when we start discussing the clinical considerations of our algorithm for an AI-enabled medical device. I think it's also important to really talk a little bit about a case study to bring all these principles together and help us talk in more practical terms. And I would like to begin with discussing an example of a cardiovascular device, since I have been mentioning a lot about cardiovascular devices. So let's imagine, as a case study, if we can go to the next slide, we have an AI medical device that you're imagining as an indication, the early detection and diagnosis of heart disease. So that's our dream. This is our device. This is what we want to bring to market. And the question that you may come to us and ask us, you will say, okay, how long will it take me to get FDA clearance and how much will it cost? So that's, again, the most common questions we will get. So now, if we take this device to the regulators, they will ask us a lot more questions. So might as well ask these questions ourselves. Because if we truly have this AI-enabled medical device, we need to understand that heart disease, as we know, consists of a lot of different conditions. So do we understand the heart conditions that will come into play? For example, is coronary artery disease also detected? Heart attack, heart failure, arrhythmias, or another type of arrhythmia, atrial fibrillation, or all kinds of other types of conditions that they are associated with heart disease. So are we really addressing all these conditions? So do we know that? So this is the next question. Do we really believe that our algorithm is addressing these conditions? And maybe the answer is yes, this is the platform that I really want to create. But then the question is, do we really have it today? And if we believe we have it today, great. But do we have the data to prove it? And do we recognize how much data we will really need? So do we understand, the next step will be, do we understand both the regulatory and the investor expectations? And why I'm saying that is because, as we mentioned earlier, the regulator will ask us all these questions and they will want answers, as we mentioned, with scientific and actual relevant actual data, clinical data. But then our investor gave us money, let's say, based on this dream, and we may have promised him that in a year or two we'll be able to get this product to market. But this product may not be able to get to market the way that we are dreaming it for another 10, 15 years because of the amount of money, let's say, that we need, or the amount of data that we need to collect. So are the expectations realistic, and how can we really make them realistic? Because I'm not here to tell you that your device cannot go to market. I'm actually here to tell you that we are here to accelerate innovation and to truly bring those devices to market. But the idea is, how do we develop strategy? How can we develop a strategy that can actually enable the innovation of this medical device, which means, can we really think about the first indication that we will need to take to the FDA, or maybe the pathway that we will follow so that we can actually get, again, this platform to the FDA? So with that, I would like us to discuss the steps that I would recommend that we would take in order to take this device to market. So moving forward, I would recommend, if we can move to the next slide, I would like to recommend that we actually begin with the regulatory strategy. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the regulatory strategy, it will be the thinking process that is going to help us think about the initial indications for use, or the general indications for use. It's going to help us understand whether our device is classified as class 1, class 2, class 3. First of all, whether we are a medical device, I should say, and then also, again, its classification. And then, do we have a predicate? Can we be a 510K versus a de novo or a PMA? So the regulatory strategy is going to be our first step, and we're going to follow with the review of our relevant FDA guidance. So as I mentioned, there's been a lot of guidance and continues to evolve, which is the latest FDA thinking. So we're going to need to look into the FDA's database, understand what's there, understand what they are expecting, and review them. And then we will need to take our strategy along with the guidance and prepare a pre-submission. But during a pre-submission, we also need to be realistic. We only have 1 hour with the FDA. And we're going to be asking them, of course, ahead of time, multiple questions. And we need to think about what's most critical for us. Are we going to the FDA to confirm a test strategy? Most of the time it is. But before we get to that, we probably need to ask them to, and we want to confirm that they agree with our indications for use. We need to confirm that they agree with the type of submission that we're thinking. If we're thinking in particular that we have a predicate, then we would like to make sure that they also see the same strategy. And then we want to discuss our data. That's why that's the most critical question we're there to discuss. And do we need actual prospective studies? Could we get away with retrospective studies? Also, how much data can we really need? And in this case, I would also say that if you're new to AI medical devices, I would recommend that you probably have a strong regulatory team. So you look at your team, and if you believe that you need some additional support, then involve regulatory experts like MethodSense that we're here to really support the industry and to help you create the strategy. But you're also going to need a biostatistician. Again, even myself, that again, I have over 35 years of regulatory experience. I create for AI-enabled devices, I create a strategy that consists of both a biostatistician, who's also a strategist, along with a regulatory strategy. So, and the reason for that is because we can go and talk about data in general, and the FDA may respond to us that they need, let's say, 300,000 cases of prospective data. But with a good biostatistical plan, we may be able to demonstrate why the 300,000 cases maybe can be reduced to 1,500 cases or something, or some other number. So understanding again, the regulatory strategy and getting the support that you need, I believe, will help a lot with the devices that they are AI enabled. So moving forward, trying to bring the whole picture together, when it comes to how do we successfully commercialize an AI ML medical device, I believe that the successful and expedited product commercialization is actually a formula that focuses on the transparency principle, which means that we take into consideration the team and the diversity of the team, the product and its overall life cycle, and all the players involved, and also the different interests of the different stakeholders. So what that means is that we're looking at our team, we realistically think about our strengths and weaknesses, we bridge in any gaps with additional expertise as needed. This is why consultants are in the market, to support the industry. Then you look at your device, you make sure that you fully understand the current capabilities of your product, if you can, and what's going to be most critical for you if you need to narrow its indications. And then we need to look at the regulators, depending on whether we're going first to US at the FDA, or Europe, going to notified bodies, or Canada or other industries. And we try to figure out how these stakeholders, the regulators will become our partners. What role they're going to play in the team. How can we make sure that we understand their interests so that they can support our interests? And then another important and critical contributor here is our investors. Our investors, they need to be informed. They need to understand what we're dealing with, why this particular device may need to get to market in a stepwise approach, or what we need in order to bring this total indication to market so they can actually support us. I cannot tell you how many conversations I have had with investors that they have been told unrealistic, or they have had unrealistic expectations because they just didn't know. And I had to be there to really support and help them understand so they can support and invest in that innovation so we can accelerate it. And I believe that all this needs to be supported by technology as well, because all these players need to communicate with each other, as well as the information that they share with each other. So the product development lifecycle and its stakeholders need also a supporting technology. They need a platform that can support the transparency principle. So that's how I believe, in a nutshell, you can actually bring a medical device to market in a more expedited fashion. And with that, at MethodSense, as I mentioned at the beginning, we've been in business for over 25 years, and we really believe in the synergy of both technology and experience. So for that reason, we have built LuminLogic, which is a platform that it's really focused on that transparency principle and brings all these elements together. So when you come to MethodSense, you actually get both them, the technology along with the expertise for that holistic approach. And with that, I'm going to say thank you to all of you. Again, thank you so much again for having me here. And Balaji, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Oh, this is wonderful. Probably less than halfway through your presentation, the first thought that struck me was this should have been a 5-session presentation. And I'm just being honest and upfront with you. There are so many different elements of what you've presented that could stand on its own, and I can actually see 5 different presentations from these. You managed to compress all of these. Unfortunately, we were running out of time, and what I really would like to do, what the Ojo Yoshida report would like to do, is invite you back. Not 1 year from now. A couple of weeks from now, maybe right after the New Year's celebration, we would like to have you back to discuss the various elements of these. Because you know what, I can show you my questions. There are so many. We just don't have time to address them. However, I think I'd like to maybe just ask one. AI just burst onto the scene with ChatGPT and all of that. But we know that things were already going on in the background. And you highlighted this when you said almost over 950 devices, AI-enabled devices have already received the FDA approval. Yeah. This is in the US alone, right?
Yes.
And I don't even know who guided these people through all of these. The question in my mind, based on your background, is this: you've been a regulator, you work with a regulatory agency, but now you're in the private sector. Who is guiding the regulators?
Well, actually, that's why I'm saying that they are actually this particular time. That's why I mentioned I believe that they learned from the past, and this time they have created all kinds of different harmonization efforts and industry expert consortiums that they're receiving input and they're listening. So they're listening to experts, to the industry. They are paying attention to the data. So there is a lot, just like us, we are moving fast. They are trying to moving fast, but of course, again, with different focus. So yes, they are actually obtaining data from each other, what they're learning from each other across the world, and they are taking all this into consideration, and it shows in the harmonization efforts that they are showing to us, that they're preparing, and the guidance that is coming out in the industry. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, the continuous learning algorithm, the adaptive algorithm, is very interesting to all of us. But the challenge that we are also having, as once we move away from the locked algorithm, it's the continuous submissions. So that means, okay, I just went through this multi-million dollars effort on bringing my first algorithm to market, and now I got to go and do it again because my algorithm, is learning. I mean, I don't have this kind of money. So, and the regulators are listening and understanding, and they're bringing us out guidance and ways. So we need to that's why I mentioned the transparency principle in my mind, which again, they are speaking about it, is very critical to all of us. So yes, they're listening from each other and we're listening to them as well.
May I squeeze out a concession from you, please? Would you kindly agree to another podcast where we would then break down some of these and probably offer the opportunity? I'm saying this because of our listeners, and I'm also saying it because there's so much that we can learn from you. Would you agree to come back to the Ojo Yoshida report and do another presentation where we break these down over a period of, I don't know how many podcasts, and talk about the AI-enabled medical devices and the processes that companies are having to go through to get FDA and also international approvals.
For sure, I would love that. I appreciate it very much. I think that again, we learn from each other. I learn on a daily basis. Every submission, it teaches us as well. There is so much that I mean, this space moves so fast. So absolutely, would love to.
Excellent. And here you have it, guys. Thank you, Rita. Will be back. We'll be back before next year, and we're looking forward to it. Have a great rest of your week and happy holidays.
Thank you.